Okay, there we go. Here we are. So, hope audio is
Yay!
sounding good. Yay, we're here. Okay, let's see. How are you doing, sir? I'm glad to have you back again.
You know what? I'm doing all right. And to be back with this particular script, thank you very much. Yeah, no, it's fun. It's always fun to be here. You put on a good show, and I'm grateful.
Thank you. I do my best given my very limited resources to invest in this at the moment, but hopefully, with the way as hectic as things are going all over the place, there seems to be a guiding star. It's light is dim, but it's getting brighter and brighter every week, and
There
I'm
we go.
hoping that as that illuminates more areas, yeah, some of that illumination will like wash over the rest of us, and we'll feel a lot more energetic and a lot more ambitious. Oh boy. Yeah. So you're back. It's only been a few weeks actually. Uh,
Yeah, it was a short break this time, but gosh, yeah, you picked a good one to bring me back, and I appreciate it.
yeah. This one, when I read the log line, I'm like, this might tickle Adega's like curiosity and his fancy of sorts. So I'm getting confirmation in the chat that we're coming in 5 by 5, which is great considering the amount of minutes we invested in balancing this audio before the show. So that's good. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. Welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs, discussing scripts both professional and amateur, circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, a behind-the-scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I am your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me again this week is the wonderful Adega of Adega Outlaw. Glad to have you back, sir.
Wonderful evening.
We've got a good evening, yeah, and I think we've got a good start to this weekend with the type of script we'll be reading today. It's got some interesting aspects to it, so
All right.
let's get into it without any further delay. This week's script is titled "Mom," and it's written by Marc Bloom. It ranked 54 with 11 votes, so it's tied for with among 11 votes for around like 9 or 10 10 other scripts that a few of them we've already reviewed so far. The log line for Mom is: when a deadly virus infects mothers and turns them against their offspring, a father must do whatever it takes to protect his daughter from her mom. Adega, please share with us the synopsis for Mom.
John Slater, a dedicated doctor, aims to protect his daughter Izzy from a mysterious virus turning mothers into killers. As chaos engulfs their Ohio town, John battles infected moms, including his wife Tess, to escape with Izzy. Facing relentless pursuits and dwindling hope, they reach a barricade, only to confront a chilling twist threatening their survival.
All
I
right.
love reading those.
They're fun. I like bashing around usually for 4 or 5 days coming up with those because the synopses, like, sometimes I nail it and then sometimes I really drop the ball. but but this one, it had enough. There's a lot of substance to this type of script, and it even has, I'd probably say it has what I would call like a humorous bait and switch within the first page.
Right.
But I wanted to get a little bit of your takes on that because, for those that don't know, you have a medical background. So, and this has to deal with viruses
Mhm.
and medics. So I want to get your thoughts on that first. So, what were your first impressions, Adega, of this script?
Well, overall, first thing was this is you've given me out of the six or so that we've done together. It's the only one where I sat down and I read the whole thing in one shot. Um, and then when it came to the actual medical or healthcare aspects of it, the guy did his homework for the most part. There's one part where there's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of supposition, but you know what? This is a horror story,
Mm-hmm.
so you can throw that in there anyway. But the settings seemed right. His office seemed right. There was a lot of it where I thought, this is pretty believable. As a parent, Some of it, I imagine some people would say, right, it's things I wouldn't do, but it seemed it was very engaging. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I was actually quite engaged, and I was expecting and hoping for this to be kind of like, a moral play on the roles of parents in films, and also having a role model of sorts with this dad,
Hmm.
and and it ended up being, yeah, it this script falls quite in line with the log line and what it does imply, and it even has, I thought, a very clever, silly setup, one that would make most skeptics roll their eyes until you realize
Right.
what the story is actually about. Because we open up in Pepper Pike, Ohio. It's the early morning, and the joke is that we're seeing all of these mothers uh, doing stuff in addition to taking care of their kids. So, like, they're jogging while pushing a stroller. Um, One is dressed as
Mowing
in
the lawn with the
mowing
baby papoose.
baby papoose, and then the husband comes out to give her a drink, which I'm like, okay, that's
Yep.
funny. Um,
Yep.
and then you've got, like, the sharply dressed mom in the business attire. She's got her coffee, she's got her bag, and she's messing her, like, trying to get two unruly toddlers into her Tesla car. So we have like this type of like working mom, the feminist fantasy type of thing.
Hmm.
Going on, and you're like, oh, okay, are we going to be having this inverse where the mothers are sort of like the leaders of their pack, and then the husbands are like the stay-at-home moms of sort, or the stay-at-home dads in this case. And that's actually not what happens at all, because as soon as we get out of those mothers, we get introduced to John Slater, who's our main character, who he's riding a motorcycle, like a badass
Yeah.
motorcycle, going to work. And his work is that
Ellie is a
he's,
good motorcycle.
yeah, and his work is that he is a general practitioner, and one with who's described as, he'll put his patient's health above his own, which is a great description for a guy that's especially a doctor. Um, like, they say that he's kind of skinny in frame, but he has like he knows how to handle urgent care, and he knows how to balance things, and he's got a shorthand with his staff, and we just kind of follow him in as he goes into his daily routine, and we get through a bunch of stuff pretty quick. So share with me your thoughts on this. How did this hold up for you?
Well, again with the mom things, that was exactly my was I was thinking the same line. Here we go, another feminist thing. But when we get to his office, and then I see how it's described, uh, Mark, the author, did his homework, because it seems like if you were to get forced into certain institutions or facilities or what have you, to have an individual practitioner is tough to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the way he came in, took care of the kid that was vomiting, the way his office was set up, the type of care he was given, he is the type of guy that you would really want to go see, because I hear stories all the time of where people will complain to me and then they say, "Well, I went to this doctor and he just wrote and then sent a script. He never even put a stethoscope on, never checked my glands, never did anything else." Where this doc was a hands-on doc, so immediately, from my aspect looking at it, I'm thinking, I like this guy. I hate medical doctors, but I like this guy. So it started off pretty good, you know. The description of the secretary where she's on the phone and just gives him a number for a room number to go, that is very believable.
Mm-hmm.
That something that I have had many times, because what contrary to what people, and this is a side note, contrary to what people know, is the person at the front will see people twice as much, sometimes three times as much as what the doctor does, because they see them when they come in, assign them to a room, when they come out they see them again, where the
Mm-hmm.
doctor will just see them once. So they're busy people, and it all flowed really nice for me. It was a good setup.
Yeah, it reminded me of a few doctors' offices I've been to myself over the years. One that really stuck out was my sister's pediatrician. He was like that. He was the type of guy
Hmm.
who, as soon as he walked into he never came into the office when the room had already been filled with patients. He was already there. But in between patients, he'd always come out and see how everybody in the room was doing and let them know of the time, in addition to like the nurses operating as well. And sometimes he did this because he always had a nurse go in and then clean down the room, because he only had three examination rooms in his office. It was really small. So
Yeah.
you can kind of bounce between all three, but it usually takes like 5-10 minutes to really properly sterilize a room, even if you're a quick nurse. So even though he could see three patients, back to back to back, he'd still have to come out and wait a couple of minutes. And while he did that, he basically just kind of get, the lay of the land of what he's expected to see today from like the parents. And I remember being, in there with my sister, and my mom saying, well, this is the issue. and the doctor would be like, okay, got it. And then as soon as we get in there, he got straight into the general questions I need to, because he did the more broader scope things at first, and it did save us all a lot of time. But he was a fun, charming guy, and I'm like, those are the types of doctors I trust. And even my current GP right now, he's very similar. Like, no nonsense other than a couple of jokes here and there, but checks everything, makes sure the blood pressure's good. He'll get the notes from the Ministry of Health of what he's supposed to say, but he'll always give you like a little tongue in cheek and wink of what that he said it, and then he's like, "This is what we're gonna do." And I wish we had way more doctors like that throughout the world than some of the ones.
That's the thing. I was just gonna add to that for any of you who have the ability, because I know in certain situations, certain countries, you do not do, and you do not have that type of experience, whether it come from a pediatrician, a dentist, an oncologist, doesn't matter. If you're not feeling that, walk out.
Yep.
Because there's something wrong with that office. Find somebody else. You don't even have to sign any papers. You can walk in, you can feel, and if it doesn't feel right, you're correct. And just leave and go to somebody else. Save you a lot of time.
Oh, absolutely.
Doctor's queue there.
Yeah. I mean, one that I always looked for myself, like, because we're getting detracted a little bit here, but this is the attitude of what John is. And the fact of the matter is, like, you want a good doctor that says, listen, this is my diagnosis. I want you to find another opinion. Don't tell me who the doctor is. Because they want that separation. And sometimes, like up in here in Canada, we have a database. So, like, they'll just say, go to this database, find another doctor, and don't tell them anything other than the symptoms you have. Find out what they diagnose and what they want to do, and then pick the one that you think is best. And over the last few months, I've been doing the same thing with a couple of issues, which fortunately for myself turns out good. So, but you always want those extra opinions, because again, the doctors are the very first to admit that, like, they're human. And this is one thing that even John says, like, I'm human. I can make mistakes. So, we're going to do the best we can. And one of the things I really liked about this script, like, we're within like 3 pages and we're getting a whole lot of information on John. And we get into this one patient of his who's named Hannah Hill. She's 19 and she's very, very pregnant. And she reminds me of one of my best friends who, when she was 16 and pregnant, she was working pretty much up until like 2 weeks before she was ready to deliver. Like, she, like, everybody, even her boss, was saying, like, listen, we kind of want you to take time off and get prepped for, delivery. We don't want you accidentally delivering in the store. But she was a fierce girl. And she was so fierce that she took the last 2 weeks off on her own, and within those 2 weeks, she gave birth, and then she went right back to work only a few weeks after, part-time, like 2 days a week, because one, she really liked that job. In fact, she's now like a district leader at that company, so she's worked her way up over the years. But I was like, really, I could relate to this girl, because I'm like, I know this type of girl, and I also like how she's quick. Like, she says, I've been having these really sharp pains. Sometimes they get so bad I want to pass out. And John's first thing is like, well, I suggest you go to your OBGYN. Like, go to the expert on this. But she has this very logical things, like, I'm between shifts and your building's right across the street from work. So, and then John, being the good, caring doctor he is like, okay, he jumps right into work.
And that is completely believable. Like I said, the whole setup at the beginning, where she leaves after he sees it and says, I could pay cash. and I think it was what she only had half of it or something on that order. I can't quite remember, but she said she could pay cash, and he says, "No, that's okay." If it's a cash patient, that's one of the luxuries of being a doctor. You can do something like that. Where if it's an insurance involved, people don't understand on the doctor side of things how much of a headache goes on having to do insurance. So that was completely believable too.
Oh
It
yeah,
was he did his homework.
he definitely did because she says like she says you can take cash right because she's not covered. So she tells like her saying I'm not covered. That's a very honest way to get exposition that she doesn't have medical insurance. And John
Right,
was like, no, keep your money. I'll work something out with the front desk.
right.
Um, that I mean, there's a lot of doctors that do that. I know a ton in California that do that. Um, and the reason that they kind of reduced doing that it was just because of a lot of immigrants coming in and using their facilities and then having fake insurance paperwork,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mm-hmm.
they get struck with the bill. And then conversely enough, like even a doctor that I used to see in LA, he came up to Canada because in Canada, the insurance paperwork, those headaches, they're done by the provincial insurance program. So the doctor just has to review it quick, sign off, and then it gets billed out, and they don't have to worry about spending hours on paperwork and sorting that all out with their practice. It's already covered, which is great benefit to them. But at the same time, our infrastructure is concentrated in the cities and not so much in the rural area, and that causes a whole nother slew of problems that are actually similar in other rural areas too of the U.S. But it's like, yeah, there's no easy way to do it. So when you have one doctor, especially in this script, who's like, you know what, I will figure out a way, and he's putting the patient before the logistics. I mean, that again, it just keeps on upping the whole likability factor, and he's doing it in a
Right,
very quick time.
right. No, because I've worked for eggs, elk, furniture,
Yep.
whatever people had a set of cash. Again, I was really engaged because it was completely believable.
It was. And then what I really liked is as soon as we follow him after a day's work, he gets home, and the first thing he does is he sees his daughter who has thrown a baseball at him, and
Hmm.
he catches it like a pro, and it's talk and he's got this shorthand with his kid. They're talking about the baseball game. And his kid is named Isabella or Izzy, and she's 12, and she's a firecracker. Um, One that really does care about other people and also has her own ambitions, but she kind of also can get under John's skin with her big independent mindset, which I kind of appreciated because it's like, oh, these two they have a thing, but there's something at arm's reach here. And one of the things that John does is he likes to encourage his daughter, but also not let that encouragement go to her head, which can kind of for a 12-year-old, especially in the adolescence age, it feels like the wind's kind of taken out of their sails, so to speak, when they get that. But it's usually a
Right.
pretty good lesson to have. I just think with John, even though he's so good with his patience and his practice, when it comes to parenting here, this is the contrast. This is where we empathize with him a bit more because he just kind of screws up with the words that he wants to say to his kid, and causes a little bit of a stinging towards her ego. Um, and this is where kind of Steph comes in, and I guess she's a child protective caseworker, if I'm not mistaken. Like they weren't
Hmm.
100%
Right.
on that, but she's this very emotionally strong woman who just knows how to kind of smooth things over when John creates a rough patch, and she quickly gets Izzy to go upstairs and clean up after the baseball game, and then she just kind of like drops her veneer so that John is there, and she's just like, I hate the system I'm working in right now. Because of one of the first words that came out of her mouth once her kid's out of earshot, it's like, I had to remove two kids from their parents' custody. Should have seen them, John. They had that look. No child should have that look. Makes me want to tear this whole system apart. And
Right.
you're like, oh, okay, we get it. These people are very empathetic. They're both of their careers are designed to kind of help people, and and you could And with that line alone, it implies a lot of aspects. It implies the fact that Tess didn't believe in the result of whatever the case was, but at the same time understood that this was the way it had to be, and she probably wished that she could have found another way where it didn't have to result in, kids being separated from their parents. And
There was something about this whole scene that I thought was another from Mark was quite brilliant. And I've heard you talk it with other people that you've had of guests, and we've had it as well, where a lot of times the initial setup of the story, just a few keywords, a couple of little hints here and there, would make a huge difference with the rest of the story. There are a lot of components at this little table scene that did very well on the personality of the kid, the dad, the mom, all the way through. It was a wonderful setup. Even though I didn't necessarily like how the dad handled things or how his wife, I think a little tweaks in real life would have made things better. But it was, I could see families doing this. But that scene there really set a lot of value to things coming later on in the script.
It really did. And what I thought was also kind of great is that after Tess and John sort of like have their very brief conversation about her tough day, one of the things that's kind of funny is that neither of them cook. They ordered pizza because that's how busy they are. And then we quickly cut to them eating pizza. And of course, Izzy, the growing 12-year-old, is just wolfing down her food. I definitely could relate to that because when you're young and growing, you are so hungry, you're just trying to kill that feeling so that you can get back to, expending energy again, running around, talking with friends, what have you. And what's funny is that Izzy is eating fast because she promised she'd call her best friend, who's not doing so good because her mom's being, a pain in the butt. And Izzy, of course, is about to use a bad word, but Tess cussed her off and says, "Send, your friend our love." And as Izzy's about to leave dinner early, John notices that her knuckles are bleeding, and he's like, "Well, what happened to your hand?" The thing a concerned parent would say right away. And of course, Izzy tries to do a lie about the baseball, and John catches her right away, and he's like, "Tell me the truth." And we find out that Izzy's been fighting with a bully who has been picking on her best friend, and it's like, okay. We have this consistent type of behavior between the parents and the kid where they are very much putting other people's welfare above their own. Even with Izzy knowing that her father is going to be very upset with the fact that, she got involved in a conflict, especially one that was essentially a fight. And of course, it's a back and forth thing. And this is where, again, we expand a little bit more on John kind of being out of sync with his kid at times. And this is where he brings in his own, experience. And of course, Izzy sasses him back. and John ends up, kind of snapping. And he does a very fatherly thing, which is he's trying to establish what the rules are within the family, and then the moment there's a little bit of give, in one direction that he doesn't like, he just kind of has this brief little freak out where he's like, "I'm guessing there's no rules in this house," and it's up to Tess to kind of calm both them down. And even then, when he snaps, he realizes, "I shouldn't have done that. What the heck's wrong with me?" And it just kind of ties into, and then we find out that Tess is part of the glue that holds the family together when these rough patches come in. And then we get this beautiful scene where Tess and Izzy are hanging out in Izzy's room, and they're splitting ear pods together and listening to music. And John kind of is peering in, and he kind of wants to get involved, but he realizes that's not something he has with his kid. And you can tell it breaks his heart. And he just wishes he had that closer relationship. And then we segue into, well, how does a guy like John exercise those demons of his? Well, apparently he is a musician of sorts. He's a drummer. And he just starts pounding on the drum kit in the basement underneath the garage. And then his wife Tess joins him, and she's strumming a Stratocaster, I think, if that's right, if I'm remembering that well.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Calls
we
it a Strat, but yeah.
and these are kind of like those, 80s hippie type rock, free spirit parents that have decided to go domestic, so to speak. Like they still have their passions and they still have their vices of sorts, but they've organized their schedule so that they're parent and career first, and then they do this. And it's, I thought it was kind of interesting. It really kind of, yeah, it's a little cliche here and there, but does diversify the characters up. It's like, okay, we understand now why John, he has the motorcycle, he's got the leather jacket, he rides into work, but then he's, this very upstanding doctor. And then in the off hours, he kind of likes to wail on the drums. and his wife will play with him and jam with him. And they've got this chemistry to that. And it looks like everything's going great. And then, Tess is going to go in for a kiss. But then all of a sudden she starts coughing, coughs into her elbow. She's like, oh, I guess I'm sick. Let's have her put a rain check on that. And this is... I mean, we've been talking for about 30 minutes, but this is like 10 pages of the script. It's very dense, but at the same time, very quick to read. Because it just gets through everything very quick, and it focuses in on the moments as setups and payoffs, as opposed to breaking up the setups and payoffs into other scenes. So it's all kind of very efficiently compressed into this moment, and I really admired that. And I wanted to get, like, as you said, Adega, you were able to get through this script in one sitting. This is one of the reasons why. Like, there's a lot of white on the page, a lot of single line to scene descriptions, and then dialogue. And the dialogue is also nice and short and terse. So that's a little redundant. It's very terse, but to the point.
That's the thing that frustrates me about a lot of entertainment is there's a lot of things that will either go in circles or are so far tangent that it has no relation to the actual story. This doesn't do that. There's no circles. There's no flashbacks needlessly. There's no tangents on anything. All it is really good, not perfect, but really good foreshadowing.
Yeah. No, really great setup, especially like they frame a lot of the setups as just regular events in the day. And then
because you find out with this scene that there is a basement.
Yep.
You find out the relationships to each other, especially like you said, when they had that thing special where mom had an earbud, the daughter had an earbud, and he was about to come in. He says, I can't break that. One, he doesn't want to interfere with their time, but you get to feel for him, and it was just, I think, 2 sentences.
Yeah.
So it was, yeah.
And it's really good. And then we get through this day really, really quick, and then we get into the next day where, and this one is where we have a kind of like a dream sequence of sorts where we're introduced to an old woman's face with like crow's nests and pursed lips and eyes that kind of look right past you. Very void's description. And then all of a sudden her flesh just starts like peeling off of her face in a very frightening image. And this is a nightmare that John is startled awake from at the same time as the alarm goes off. And I can relate to those moments where you have a dream that kind of, it concludes right before the alarm goes off, and like you just all of a sudden are awake and you're like, oh, what time is it? And you look over and it's like 1 minute before your alarm goes off, and you're like, oh, that's weird.
Right.
But in this case here, we have kind of like this facilitated by way of a nightmare. And of course, Tess is not feeling too well, and he does the doctor husband thing, like she's running a fever, and she's trying to brush it off like she's fine. But no, she feels lousy, and John's like, okay, you're bedridden today. Don't do any work. I'll take care of the kid. It's his day to do the drop off and pick up. And one of the things that he does in order to try and get in better graces with his kid and try and build up that connection, he's like, let's take the motorcycle. I'll take the bike into school with you. And of course she wants to drive, and he's like, no. Which is the right thing to say, and it was good chemistry too. Is because he says, yeah, your mom says she's looking green around the gills, but I'm already set to do the school run, so let's take the old gal motorcycle out for a stretch, and I'll drop you off and I'll pick you up, and it's it kind of like mends a little bit of the friction from the day before. And one of the things that's actually kind of fun, and I like this little exchange, is that when Izzy finds out that her mom is sick, her first response is like, "You never get sick," and then Tess says, "Moms are people too. Now give me a hug and go have fun at school, and no fights." And everything's kind of just we're going back through the new routine again. So we're seeing okay, John drops off his kid. He heads over to work, and the first thing that he notices as he gets into work is there's a lot of mothers there,
Right.
with a lot of the same symptoms that his wife has, and his receptionist is like shocked because she's like, "I've never seen anything like this before," and the line extends outside of the clinic and around the block, and I thought, wow. I wonder what Adega would think about this moment.
Well, it's one of the minor things, but if that was in my situation, the first thing I would do is I would call for help from the CDC or something else. There's something really wrong. That just does not happen.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, his not as quickly as it should have, and maybe that has to do with his cavalier, or he was thinking too much of his daughter or something. But that right there should have been the biggest clue. There is serious danger in this neighborhood. Wife's sick. All these ladies are sick. What's going on?
Right. And what John doesn't know, because this happens back at home, is that Tess, she starts trying to work again, but she decides she's going to take a shower, and she ends up taking a shower so hot that her face and skin starts to go red from like she's kind of burning herself, but at the same time she's not flinching, so it feels like some of her nerve ends are like kind of dull to the pain, and her pupils are dilating, and she's got that distant, faraway stare. And I thought this was really
also getting quite a bit of strength too, because the way she was cranking on the knob for the shower was a little intense as well.
Oh
You can
yeah,
see
she
that,
breaks
well,
it off.
For some reason, she's gotten stronger and painless.
Yeah, and this only gets more crazy as we go. But somehow John kind of makes it through the day. But over at school, we get to see a little bit of Izzy's life firsthand, and we also get to see why Izzy and Mel are good friends. Mel, yeah, she's a little chubby for her age, and she doesn't have much self-esteem, and we find out that her mother doesn't pack her a proper lunch anymore. She's packing her baby food because her mom saw someone on TikTok say this is a great way to lose weight. And this reminds me of that controversy that I think Lady Gaga had like a decade ago, when people asked how does she...
I don't know about that.
Yeah. Oh, no?
No, but I do know when I was in high school that some of the girls did do that. It wasn't unusual to see that. I'm thinking, oh gosh, that reminds me of some really demented kids in high school, but they did do that.
No, I knew a couple of girls that did that. They claimed they were eating hummus, but I know what hummus looks like. It doesn't look like baby food.
It doesn't smell like peas.
Yeah, and mixed carrots and peaches. It's like that's
right.
But yeah, like Mel thinks her life sucks because her mom, is putting pressure on her. You have the whole like idea like a beauty, not realizing that 12-year-olds go through various body shapes all the time, even if they're eating healthy. It's just the way it is. I had some friends that, they got full very quick, but they were very large people, and then all of a sudden the last leg of puberty hits and everything just kind of balances out. And that tends to happen here and there. But Izzy doesn't think, disagrees with, of course, Mel's mom, and she tosses the baby food out. She's like, here, have some of my sandwich and have half my lunch. Your mom doesn't need to know that you're eating proper food at school. And then we get introduced to the girl bully, who, for a 12-year-old, she's done up like like an adult with makeup and acrylic nails and all that stuff, and Izzy is, of course,
Right.
making fun of her for it. Blair is, taking digs at Mel, and Izzy has to basically contain herself from wanting to like just punch Blair in the chops. But then we get this other really cool aspect, which is Izzy's phone vibrates with a text from her mom, then Mel's with a text from her mom, which is all like thinking of you, love you, and then all the other kids in the cafeteria get a text from their mom saying something similar. And I'm like, that's pretty creepy. I mean, I could just visualize that in the cafeteria where everything just kind of goes silent for a moment as all the kids stop mid conversation to take a look at their phone, which happens already these days, which is creepy enough as it is. But then to find out that it's all a very, very similar message is kind of crazy. It's like, okay, here are the building blocks. We've got Tess feeling feverish and sick, not doing so well, dull to pain, has a burst of adrenaline for increased strength. We've got John at his clinic, and almost the majority of his patients are all mothers with similar symptoms to what he just saw with his wife. And now on the kids' side of things, who have no idea about the sickness or whatever spreading on, but they're all getting a message from their mothers about how much they're loved. And to have a great or thinking of you, great day type of stuff. And I'm like, this is some really good. I like how he's establishing some rules here. How we're getting the building blocks, we're able to put it together, and because you and I have the fortune of knowing the log line and what's going on, we have a little extra dramatic irony in here. We are able to put the pieces together a lot faster. But I think this is a really good and effective setup because we cut straight to the end of school, and you've got Izzy and Mel and the other children exiting to go get picked up. John kind of pulls in on the motorcycle, which is great. But then we get introduced to Mel's mom, Sarah, who she's acting a lot more affectionate than Izzy has ever seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And she's described as like this immaculately groomed woman, fit, decked out in yoga workout leggings, and has a white Mercedes, and basically a very lavish lifestyle where clearly Mel is like the black sheep of the family, and we understand why someone like her mother would be bothered by that, because it doesn't line up with the image that she's presenting. And the Izzy and the Mel, they do their friend thing, which is call me later. It's like you spent the whole day at school, you still want to talk to this person afterwards.
Right. Yeah,
like,
they're kids.
They're kids.
That's the way it is.
It's the way it is. And then as John is kind of driving out, the cars, all the mothers in the car are kind of acting a little aggressive. And John has to take some evasive maneuvers to make sure he doesn't hit anybody, or especially the kids. And he's seeing some looks on some others' faces that is like really just gets him unsettled, where they're just staring into an empty void, or there's just something off with them. And
yeah, there was that one van with the mother who was just blanked out, and the two kids were going nuts in the back with terror, and he just was wondering what happened with that car, but everybody else was acting a little weird too.
Yeah, and I thought it was kind of like, okay, this reminds me of other type of zombie movies where they try to keep things going subtle, especially with Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where everything is just a little bit off, but not enough to really get on the average person's radar. Like you'd have to be looking for it in order to even process it. But he heads home, and the first thing he sees is Tess is feeling a whole lot better, and she's in the garage working on the car like a mechanic.
Right.
And I'm laughing when I'm reading this because I'm like, okay, that's quite a turnaround. And of course, like Tess is saying, like, oh yeah, I'm just taking a look inside. I heard noises, sounded like rats or something. And John's just happy that she's feeling better, and so they head back into the house. And one of the things that they don't notice is that there's a hammer and a box of nails like on the ground by the door. And before they're able to fully get inside, the next door neighbor named Sydney, who's like in his 50s or so, kind of a nosy neighbor, one that John, tolerates, doesn't hate, but just tolerates. And he's freaking out, saying like, I can't find my mom because he's taking care of his 80-year-old mother, and he's like, she's not in bed, and she's technically bound to a wheelchair. So where she went is really perplexing. And of course, John, being the nice guy he is, decides, okay, I'll come over to your place. Maybe we can see if we can find where your mom has gone to.
And we already established, he's a good doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one, just being in the neighborhood and someone is injured or having mental problems. You would think someone that old would have some type of acuity issues. And I was like, yeah, I'll hop right to it, even though he didn't like the guy.
Yeah,
it made sense.
It did, and I want to get we've crossed over like the inciting incident. Now we're kind of seeing that pay off. I wanted to get your thoughts because we have these two scenes that sort of break us into the actual story that are running parallel to each other. I wanted to get your take on how Izzy and Tess, their little moment where she's making like the grilled cheese. What were your thoughts on that part there? How are you liking the escalation and the clues that were being dropped by the writer in this moment here?
We had already established she wasn't a very good cook, so making grilled cheese sandwiches was, that's pretty basic. That's good. The kid's excited about it. Slice of bread hits the ground. Not a big deal. Slice the second bread too. And the tension is building. Dad's away. Mm-hmm. Kid seeing mom is not paying attention. And she's overdoing it with the butter. Doesn't care where the bread lands into the grill or on the floor. And I thought it's like you said, it's a typical, the monster is coming. We're starting to see it ease in. And her hyperactivity from working on the engine and then dragging her in, I thought that was, and someone Izzy's age, that one was a little, it depends on the child.
Yeah.
Some of them will see the bread on the floor and think nothing of it. Others will think, oh, mom is screwed up. She's still sick. So I think the author played it a little bit on Izzy not quite catching on, but still enough to know something ain't right, but it's not dramatically bad. So I thought that was pretty good. I don't have a problem pretty much with any of it. When I had a little bit of trouble, but it's not a big deal. When he was next door with the neighbor.
Yeah.
Them looking for the neighbor's mom. Now, knowing how dementia works, this one seemed like, well, they're looking around the house. If he was a good doctor, the first thing he would have been checking is which doors and windows could have been open. Because when people get older and if they're having dementia incidences, they'll jump out of windows. They'll do all kinds of strange things. So looking under bed and closets is probably not your best bet. You should be looking for windows. And they would have found her a little bit quicker.
Right.
But all of it was still believable. For a monster show, yeah, it was still believable. And here's another thing, too. And this is one of the major problems I have with this. Not to hinder the story in any way, but I did have a lot of, this is almost expected to happen because I've seen it in other shows. Mm-hmm. It's almost cliche. Don't get me wrong, I think it was really well done and I sped right through it, but it was expected. So divide the father-daughter, families all split up, neighbors having issues, all the moms are having issues. It seemed like a regular zombie buildup.
Oh, it definitely did.
But other than that, I think yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely did. I think it works for what it needed to do, but I mean, it definitely leans a little bit too heavy on something that we've all kind of seen before. I think the whole idea is that the writer was going for, and this is all speculation, of course, is that he has that payoff in mind, and he's trying to distract you by trying to show it slightly differently in different areas. But it's a really hard thing to do because it does require a huge stretch of the imagination in order to execute. And
right.
And what he has here is they find the mother. She's outside. She's in the backyard, but she's tapping on the sliding door, and she's standing up, which shocks Sidney Roth, like because he hasn't seen her mother stand up on her own in
Yeah.
quite some time.
Yeah, they
Um,
had that scene in the bedroom where the wheelchair was sitting there and says she can't because she's wheelchair bound, but yet she's gone.
Yet she's gone. Which I mean, this is actually part of the payoff of what we saw earlier with Tess, where she's able to break the shower head handle
Right.
off the wall. And the funny part, and I liked how the writer described this, that she's standing outside with a cane, and of course, Sydney, he opens the door to try and get his mother inside. We've realized, oh, it's not a cane; it's actually a rake. And she's saying like sweet, lovable things to her son. You know, saying like, you know, you're beautiful. I love you. Just had the most wonderful dream. And then all of a sudden, she plunges the rake into her son's chest, and it freaks Sydney and of John out, of course. Um, and of course, like John's kind of helpless. He doesn't really know what to do, and before he even takes an action, the mother removes the rake from her son's chest and then just starts bashing the rake into her face. And
Yeah.
I'm like, this is crazy. Because I mean, I was not expecting, you know, self-deletion of sorts after the attack on the children came in, but it did create an extra sense of stakes here.
The urgency just went through the roof. Yeah.
It really did, because now we're seeing like, oh, if the mother has this euphoria about her child, praises them with love right before they execute them, and then immediately executes themselves, we're now looking at, oh, it's not just that Izzy's in danger, but even Tess is in danger of herself as well. And this has not been put together yet by John at the moment, but it freaks him out, and he's like the 911 has already been called by Sydney, and John's holding the phone, and then as soon as the operator, like, you know, says, hey, what's going on, he's like, yeah, I need to report. And then of course the operator's like, you need to go on hold because now other calls are coming in. And
Right.
basically
Right.
this is the turning point. Everything has gone nuts. and so of course John immediately rushes home, and Tess at this point, she's still buttering up the grilled cheese but hasn't really made any yet, and then puts her hand into the panini press and then presses it down, which triggers Tess to go, you are out of your mind.
Right.
And I'm liking the flow of this, because as soon as like John comes in and Izzy is kind of confused about Tess spins it around and says, hey, honey, why is there blood on your shirt? And John is like trying to say, Izzy, come with me. and now we have this great little tension moment between Tess, John, and Izzy, because Izzy now doesn't know what to do. She's like, she's a little bit scared of her mom because she's acting weird, but her dad's now acting weird, and he has fresh blood on his shirt.
Yeah, the poor kid would be very, very twisted.
Very, very twisted. But what's funny is that as soon as John kind of comes in and they're trying to get out, he notices that somehow, I guess while they're away at work and at school, Tess has boarded up all of the doors and windows with the exception of the front door. And she's now cornered them off so that they can't get to the front door. And she is demonstrating super speed and strength trying to come after Izzy. And so we have this set piece of them kind of trying to keep Tess away from Izzy, and John is stuck, in between them, of course. And Tess has no reservations about trying to kill John either, because she just wants to get to her daughter. And we have this great little point of irony, which is she's saying great things and then is coming at her aggressively. And then when Izzy actually starts kind of reacting negatively towards Tess, we get the whole kind of like an Evil Dead, I'll swallow your soul type of possession line. And these two are just kind of trying to find a way to get out of this house and reach the front door so that they can, get away from Tess. And I wanted to get your thoughts, because we have there's a boning knife involved where Tess grabs that, and they can't get out through the garage door because she's put bicycle locks on the rails so that the thing can't even manually go up. The car has been disabled, so a bunch of wiring from the battery has been removed. They end up getting into the basement and hiding behind the drum set and everything while Tess kind of makes her way down there. I want to get your take and a little bit of your description of these scenes for the audience so that they can kind of grasp like how cleverly this contained set piece has worked.
Well, this is where I had one of the biggest problems, to be honest with you. I think some of it was clever, but the biggest issue was his description of how she actually locked the house. Because Tess is there, and when Izzy and her dad come home, it doesn't explain exactly which door they go through. He goes to the neighbor's house and then comes back. So how the house gets locked up, I think, could use a little bit better explanation, and how she was able to guard the door. It's vague, and think of little details like this. So, the locks that were put on the garage door opener, that's one thing. But to me, it seemed it needed a little bit more, maybe one or two sentences on how she was able to secure the place and prevent them from leaving. But that for me, when you get to see the rest of the plot, you'll see that because there's another time when something similar like that happens. It should be cleaned up.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Well, I think there's an opportunity where, as soon as John comes in through the front door, Tess could probably go to the front door, close it, turn the deadbolt, and then break off the handle for the deadbolt.
Right, like your daughter's in the kitchen, go have a word with her, and then when he walks away, she could do something simple like that would fix it.
Yeah.
And it's only like one or two lines. But then we already established that they had the basement from the garage, which was very well done. And then having them in there, the whole suspense. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. They're in there. She's searching around for them. Yeah.
No. It's some of sometimes my health isn't real happy with me, but I'm having a little personal moment. But speaking of having a doctor on the scene, but no, it was. I liked this scene, especially when the mother with the knife and the guitar. Her insanity starts to really become expressed to the daughter, and how she's infected, and then the turnaround to get out and then push the car over the door. That was really well done as well.
It was pretty clever. And then when they were able to finally get out, they're going to be heading to the motorcycle, and then we have this scene, which again kind of reminded me a little bit of Evil Dead, where the mother, she's in the basement, but she's looking through the window that's to the basement. It's got some bars on there, and there's glass to it, so they can't hear. But she ends up calling her Izzy's cell phone, and she picks it up, and so we can visually see her talking to her kid through the cell phone, saying, I miss you. I just want to be with you. You're my kid. Don't go away. Don't leave me down here. And John is trying to convince Izzy, like, listen, your mother loves you, but whatever is going on here, that is not your mom, and we gotta get out of town and figure out what's going on, because, and Izzy is actually starting to notice around in the neighborhood, mothers are going crazy with their kids. Like, they are.
Yeah.
It's nuts. There's like spider monkeys hopping over fences and cars, and the kids are running away, and then the mothers are tackling them, and then just, oh God, doing horrible things. And
one of my favorite scenes. It was it's time to flee. That desperation.
Yeah.
Where some of the successful mothers, they see them, they're just leaping off of their houses, because it was like the neighbor where she smacked herself with the rake. They did what they wanted to do, and now life is complete. So they're 86 in themselves. The chaos was setting in, the drama, the urgency, all of it was well played, and that phone call was perfect.
The phone call was great. I especially liked how Tess was trying to get inside John's head, because Tess talks about how John is something of a mommy's boy. And the reason being is because his mother never gave him any type of encouragement and kind of set a bar so high that kind of compelled him to try and achieve it, all to just see if he could get affection from his mother. And he never did. And this is
Yeah,
the first news
that
that
makes that good scene on the bike later on. Yeah.
yeah, and this is the first time like Izzy's learning about this and finding it kind of weird, but it also builds Izzy's trust more in John because mom is now acting really weird, and so they can't get to the motorcycle, um, but what they do see a van with like tinted windows and whatnot just kind of idling on the street, and John opens it up to find well, unfortunately, a lesbian couple and their daughter have been asphyxiated because one of the mothers, we don't know which one, uh, pumped in the exhaust into the van,
Yep.
and it's like, oh my god. So yes, like even like call it what you will if you want to call it like a woke thing or what have you, but it basically said like, yeah, as long as there's one biological mother involved, the same thing is going to happen even if it's a same sex couple. Um, and so we have this kind of like revelation moment that's like it's indiscriminatory to that. It's just mother to child triggers this virus and just forces them to do it to completion. So John has to do the horrible thing of like telling Izzy get to the other side of the van while he is dumping these three bodies out onto the street and then cracking open the sunroof, but not the side or passenger, the driver or passenger windows, because they need that protection from
Right.
from
Right.
Tess, who is now broken the glass and is using superhuman strength to bend the protective bars over the window so that she can squeeze through. And the description of like she's squeezing through this tight area, and you can hear her ribs kind of cracking. And
Hmm.
then as John gets into the driver's seat and he's trying to start everything and close and get the automatic side door closed, he sees a woman across the street who's walking on one broken leg, just inching towards a kid that's running away, and it's total like it's total chaos and pandemonium. And of
Yeah.
course, like you get the another cliche moment where he's trying to start the car and the engine's not turning over, and of course Izzy is getting panicked, but then of course the engine turns over and they're able to take off, but Tess is running like the T1000 with super speed, chasing them down, and manages to like stab one of the tires with the boning knife. And so now they're driving with the tire that's losing air, and it's going to be a flat. And and this
It's
is
one of
where
the run flat ones, so you know you got 60 miles on it before it gives way.
yeah, and of course John is saying we'll be okay, we can run flat for a bit. And then he's fiddling around on the radio, just trying to see if there's any information. And this is where I think we have kind of like one of the weaker scenes, and that is because we have a visual scene of just these two characters silent in the car, listening to the radio, and it doesn't have the same type of impact as if you were like watching a news conference or like visually seeing this on the page. It's on the radio. It's kind of like a passive information, so it doesn't kind of feel like it has as much weight. And what ends up happening is that yeah, we're listening on the radio that this famous doctor who's like a chemist of sorts, named Dr. Lynch. She suspects that this is a virus of sorts and that there's three possibilities. It could be like a 24-hour thing. It could be an ongoing thing, like perpetual, or it could kind of go dormant and then always be lingering around. And so, Adega, I want to get kind of your take on how she set up what this virus is and what possible outcomes could happen, and also a little bit more. I mean, if you're able to talk on it about the fact that it's kind of a virus that is attached to the fetal micro immersion. No, what is it?
Well, I thought about this one quite a bit because there part of it deals with a type of science that we're just starting to get into, where, a lot of people realize that when a mother breastfeeds, there's a communication through chemicals between the baby and the mother, or what the baby needs, the mother's body will start producing new chemicals or new, what would say, composition of the breast milk so that the baby gets specifically what that individual baby needs. There is also some real early stuff, and how the author of this, Mark, got a hold of it is pretty cool. Where some of the infant cells from placenta to mother before they're even born starts manipulating the genetic response of the mother to the baby. There's an actual type of physiological bond that they're, it's more hypothesis.
Hmm.
There is some evidence of it. And that's the whole nature of this virus is that that bond of mother to genetic child is set before they are born. Now, there are viruses. We know this because people who've had like herpes or various other things that will remain dormant. Chicken pox, when you have shingles in an adult, it's the chicken pox you had as a kid.
Yep.
Or if you had if you had a vaccine for it, it's that vaccine that's doing it to you.
Yeah.
So they will set up in the nervous system, parts of the nervous system where you cannot take any medication to alleviate it. It's just there for the life, and your body fights it as best as it can, and periodically it will pop out. And in the early stages of an infection, say something like this, or an epidemic or pandemic, with something that's brand new, you don't know. And so when they're on the radio saying this could be self-limiting, this could be reoccurring, we just don't know. And so that made a lot of sense to me. It was intriguing about the mother aspect through the placenta, like I said, because it's new. But it was a far better hypothesis for a zombie-like attack than just about every zombie movie I've ever seen. So I think that was very well done.
I do too, because I like the idea that it stems from this new science, but it also stems from something that if you're a man that's been around women most of your life, you'll probably encounter what's known as pregger brain, where so much of the woman's body is going into the gestation period that they kind of feel they go through bouts of being aloof or not quite there, or maybe hypersensitive to something, and it's kind of really all over the place. But I mean, we've all kind of experienced this in some variation, and I like the fact that you still have that aspect that has been around since man has been able to communicate with women, and now you found another angle as well that's that scientifically that's being explored that kind of builds it up and says, oh, this kind of makes sense. So there's a logic to it, even though it's dealing with fantasy of sorts. There's still a little bit of a logic to it because we know that for the vast majority of mothers, there is a bond to their children that seems far more than any other rational explanation can provide. It goes beyond just the gestational period and then giving birth period. There's just that something else in there, and to a degree, there's something similar to that on the men's side of things. But because it doesn't have that elongated experience of intimacy between the mother and the child, because of course the father is on the outside of those types of things, it feels like it's a little bit lower on that tier list, and that there's something going on with the mother and the child that just makes that bond a lot stronger. But and this type of script plays around with that.
Right. There is also something too that happens where there is kind of a they always say things like mother's instinct, mother knows best. They have a intuition where you got to prevent the child from doing this. And oftentimes they will find that there's real danger that they prevent simply because of a physiological or an emotional or just a sixth sense that prevents the child from being injured that the mothers have. Sometimes the fathers have a little bit of it as well. But having that actually adds a lot to these mothers having this honing sense where they can find the kid wherever they went. They know how to track them down without using the phone. The fathers, there was an incident later on where the father said, you're supposed to turn that phone off. Well, it really didn't matter because of what's coming up. We're going to find out about Mel as well.
Yeah. Because right now we've kicked off from the contained part of the thriller, which we did that in the house, and now it's gone on to a chase where basically now that they've listened on this radio, this Dr. Lynch has said something. John tells Izzy, I used to go to school with Dr. Lynch. She's an expert in virology, and she might have a means to help us here, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to be driving to her place. And Izzy is quite relieved by this, but she's also worried that she's not going to see her mom again, and she says that she can't lose her, and John has to tell her, a little bit about triage, and how as his priority is her, and the one thing that he has to do is he has to make sure that she's safe before they can do anything to try and help the mom. And this is not something Izzy is able to take easily, but it does give him the breathing room he needs to basically say, like, we're going to get through this. We're going to be a family again, all three of us. Just close your eyes as we kind of like go, because as they're getting out of town, as what you mentioned earlier, we're seeing more mothers perched on the roof of their respective homes and just swan diving off. And it is pretty gruesome. And of course, as they're starting to get out, before they get out of town, Izzy says, we can't leave just yet. We have to get my friend Mel. And this causes a little bit of friction with John, because he's like, well, we can't do that, honey, because, time is short. And Izzy says, I just can't not let her suffer like this. Like, we have to go see if she's okay, because, it's her best friend. And John agrees. And so they take the van that they've stolen to Mel's house, and they manage to find Mel running away from her mother. And she hops into the van, but she's kind of in shock. And so John walks through Izzy to be like, just keep talking to her. Tell her what we're doing, so that she can kind of like get out of this little panic state. And so Izzy kind of lays out the plan again. So we get a little bit of a repetition of the plan, but I liked how Izzy kind of words it, because it's not as, adult-like.
It's a kid to kid, not an adult to kid.
Yeah, it's a kid to kid thing, and it works, and Mel kind of comes back to the land of the living of sorts, and because the tire has gone completely flat at this point, they manage to like pull into a gas station, kind of almost on the outskirts of town, and they decide that they're going to
have another one of those cliches.
Another one of those types of cliches, but they end up deciding to like hunker down here. So this is where they'll be camping out for the night. So they turn off all the lights, they put down all the blinds. Mel and Izzy are kind of trying to, make do with what they have. So they're eating some of the junk food, as John is kind of getting, stuff ready to, I guess his plan was, they didn't quite get into it, but I guess his plan was going to be like replace the tire at the gas station by morning, and then take off to continue where they're going to do. But before they can do that, Mel's mom shows up, having tracked them down. And of course, they don't say anything. They don't do anything to try and be to try and give away that they're actually there. So eventually she kind of leaves, or we think she leaves, and what follows is actually a very brilliant tactic that I was not expecting. This one actually really surprised me, and that was when Sarah kind of just turns around. Eventually, like what we think is like to leave to go search somewhere else, she ends up taking the gas nozzle off the pump, and then starts pumping the gas towards the Gas and Go store. And it seeps in underneath the cracks in the door and into the gas station, and then she sets it on fire, basically putting everyone inside at risk, these three characters. And I'm like, that's really clever. I mean, terrifying, and one that not many people would think of to do firsthand, but it's like, wow, yeah, this Sarah lady is pretty vicious. Like, this virus really does put you in a position, and so we got this great little set piece where the fire is kind of spreading rapidly throughout the store, and they're trying to get out, but the main door has been kind of partially blocked by, I guess, an outdoor ice cream machine or something.
Right.
And so he's trying to get out, push open the door, get it out, and somehow Sarah manages to get into the building while it's on fire, and John manages to get out, and he grabs Izzy, and they get Mel, and then of course Sarah grabs Mel, and so now there's a tug of war between where Mel is in the middle, and Izzy can't hold on, and of course she lets go, and Mel is then pulled into the flames by her mother, and Izzy is just like lost it. And she tries to jump back in to save her friend, and John has to grab her by the waist and pick her up and basically like tell her like she's gone. And I wrote this down in my notes. I'm like, oh my God, they took out the best friend, the young kid. Like, you don't see little kids, especially of this character type, biting the bullet in a sense here. And I thought that's a really bold choice. Like, wow, you haven't just gotten rid of the mothers, and you haven't gotten rid of just the adult children. You got rid of another 12-year-old girl who essentially is a victim of bullying, not just from a fellow student, but also to a degree from her mother. And I was like, wow, that's some commitment there to the premise, to really make us worry that John and Izzy are not going to make it in this story.
Yeah, no, it was really well played. Really well played. That's something that I think a lot of times you hear with all kinds of stories, let alone these scripts, is an author should not be afraid to kill off an important character.
Yeah.
Especially if it adds a lot to the plot, and this did really well.
Oh, yeah, and it also leads into what you mentioned earlier with regards to the mother tracking him, because she turned off her phone at first, and then she turned it back on so that she could coordinate with Mel, and she forgot to turn it off again. And so there's like 80-odd messages on Izzy's phone from her mother, and of course John has to reveal, like, oh, I told you to turn it off because she could track you. And Izzy's like, well, why? He's like, well, you're getting into fights at school, and I put a tracking app on your phone so that we could keep tabs on you. And of course Izzy sees this as an invasion of her privacy and what have you, and John, of course, takes the phone and smashes it on the ground so that hopefully the mother can't find where they're going to go to next. And we continue on with the chase scene of sorts. Like they run through a cemetery. They're looking for another vehicle. Eventually, I think they find another motorcycle, and then of course the National Guard starts coming in, and they've got like black lights going on, because one of the symptoms of this virus.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah,
is like this white secretion that comes out of their tear ducts, and it's like gooey, like kind of like tree sap or sorts, and
right.
And
it fluoresces under black light.
And it fluoresces under black light, and so it's and what's crazy is that even though as they're trying to get away, we find out that the Dr. Lynch is absolutely correct. This only does affect women that have had children. And one of the there's this moment where they get onto another motorcycle and they take off. I think it's a Harley Davidson that they find. And Tess grabs at this woman in a van, who basically starts freaking out at Tess, and she grabs a gun, and she's like, this is the reason why I didn't have kids. And then she tries to shoot Tess, but Tess, with her super strength, kind of switches the odds and then shoots off the woman's ear, and then tosses her out of the van, and then chases off after John and Izzy. And what I want to do at this moment, because we kind of glossed over it a little bit, but it's another great payoff, and I wanted to take a moment after we got to this point where we started seeing all the chaos going around and what's happened, and we got to Mel and everything. I wanted to frame this scene that comes earlier a little bit later, because it was so well set up in the first 5 pages, and now we get this payoff kind of before we get to escaping the main part of town, and that is when the 19-year-old girl Hannah, who is pregnant, goes into labor, and this happens shortly after John and Izzy are kind of weaving away from the National Guard that is kind of opening fire on all of these mothers that are chasing after their children. And John actually gets like a hit, I think, in the side or near the stomach, and Izzy has to kind of put her arms around his waist to try and put pressure on the wound. And there's no way that they can get to a hospital in time, but Izzy says, well, we're actually kind of close to your clinic. And so that's where they head to. And we get this scene where Izzy now has to kind of perform a minor assisted surgery on her dad, who is using tweezers to get out some of the bullet fragments. And Izzy has to kind of, gauze up the wound and then put pressure on it and then close it off. And as she's doing this, Hannah and her boyfriend come in because Hannah's going into labor. Now, this part I thought was a little bit weird because even though John took a ton of pills, which I think were some antibiotics and painkillers, he seemed way too coherent lucid. And lucid to be doing, essentially giving birth, helping Hannah give birth at this point. It almost feels like the bullet wound he took didn't even factor in anymore afterwards. So I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, that's the thing, without knowing exactly, because he said it was a handful. So it more than likely you're correct that there were some that was antibiotics, some were painkillers. What they were, don't know, and it all depends on what he took. He seemed a little bit unhindered because of the injury that he got with the shot. Doing the actual removal, it was described very well. That would make anybody sick if they had the wherewithal to be able to do that to themselves. But to then go and deliver a baby, tying the mother down it seemed a little fuzzy, because if you ever seen a police arrest, even a woman, if you're trying to help them without hurting them to pin them down, that takes an awful lot of effort. So that was a little weak. It needed to be she needed to be tricked, I think. A little change with the script there. She needed to be tricked in because Izzy couldn't have done it by herself.
Yeah.
While the dad's sitting there playing quarterback or catcher. And the birthing process, everything, it seemed, other than that, didn't seem that big of a deal, having her to push and do all that to get the baby out. So my biggest thing with that whole scene was the mother. There needed to be a better description of how the mother was actually strapped into the bed. Was it what her boyfriend's name was?
I think it's Daryl.
Daryl. I'm having a hard times with names right now. Forgive me.
No, it's okay.
He responded probably pretty accurately. He should have been a little bit more help. But and I think one of the things I thought was, it may have seemed apocalyptic, but it was a one-line description which made a lot of sense. When they went into the place, before he even had the surgery done on himself, or before the baby was born, he talked about it being ransacked. And knowing that people would figure out this is an epidemic, I could see that actually happening to a healthcare facility where people would just dive in desperate for any type of answers or any type of thing that would help them. People looking for antibiotics for their mothers, looking for some type of sedative for their mothers, or just, they could have been wounded or everything else. The setup was really good, but pinning the mother down I think that was the weakest part. Everything else seemed okay. Even with the pills, you thought maybe he would have been overdosed or had too much of one thing or another. Being a doctor, there was probably several different things that he took, and antibiotics were one, painkillers are another. Could have been all kinds of different things that were going on. So that didn't bother me as much as getting that mother strapped to the bed.
Yeah, like as I'm reading it here, it's like, okay, is it a bed? They go through like table and bed, and it's like the legs. So even then, yeah. I'm still trying to think. Well, if it's a table and she's lying back on it, it has to be a pretty narrow table. Because to have your arms to lie on either side of the table, that you can actually strap them without any kind of give, where like your arms or wrists are like up against the legs. There's not many tables that are like that around. Because
right.
usually
and in a healthcare facility too, right?
Especially. But what I did like about the scene is the fact that we saw kind of Hannah vacillating between the two attitudes. Like she's able to give birth. She wants her kid protected. She's telling boyfriend Danny, I think his name's Danny, Danny, to take care of the daughter because she knows she's heard on the radio like something's going on and she's probably going to change. And then as the kid is crowning, we see that kind of 180 with Hannah, where she's now basically she's got a little bit of that whole I love my child and I need to hold my child, and she's like clawing at her stomach to try and perform a C-section on herself. And that's when they get into like holding her arms down and then tying her off. And then it goes back and forth between, I want to hold my baby. Oh my God, I'm going to kill it. Like all these horrible things. But when they finally, get the kid out of there and cut the umbilical cord, John is quick to basically like get blankets, wrap up the kid, give it to Danny and basically saying, Danny, you're all this kid has right now. And he doesn't have time to even like completely comprehend that he's a father anymore. Like he's a father at all. It's just like, here's some formula that we have in stock. Take this stuff. You're all that kid's got. You'll know what to do. Don't be nervous. You've got this. And I was like, this is actually a pretty solid kind of like, father to father message going on here. And
it's exactly what I thought too.
And on top of that, you also have this painful aspect where there's empathy from Danny because he's like, I can't believe
a 19-year-old boy and just thrown in the midst of it. And wait, my kid? What are you talking about? Wait.
Yeah, but he's also.
I thought it was very brilliant played. I could see through the script the panic on the kid's face. Wait,
yeah, you could really
do what?
Yeah, you could really picture it. But then on top of that, you also get the sense that he realizes he has to take his child, which is a daughter, away from his mother or her mother.
Mm-hmm.
And
mm-hmm.
he can tell he's broken up about this because, again, they've established very carefully and very quickly that Danny and Hannah, even though they're not married, they're in this all the way. Like, it's not like a hump and dump type of thing. It's like, no, he's there for her. Like, he's the one that brings her to the clinic, hoping that they could, deal with this issue. He's helping John with the birth, like he's a participant in this. And then the context is like the worst thing that you have to do is like this woman who's the mother of your daughter. You got to keep her away from your kid who's only minutes old. And
that reminds me of something
crazy. Yeah.
I keep interrupting you. I'm sorry.
No, it's
but
okay.
It does remind me. It reminds me of earlier on when you first see Hannah, and there was the one line, and it was another great setup. It tells a lot about that relationship and personality, where he asks, "Do you know the sex of the baby?" And she says, "No, he doesn't want to know." And then
he wants it to be a surprise.
Joke about it.
Yeah,
yeah. She makes a joke about it, but one, it shows that he is involved, and two, she respects his decision, even though she doesn't like it.
Yeah, because she calls him an idiot.
Yep.
Yeah, which is totally a loved one's thing. And every time we have a decision, we want to make a decision, or we have an idea of something, and our loved ones don't agree with it, we are the moron for for having that point of view. Right. But I thought it was great because it really does kind of show that this script had an opportunity to do something else, that like repeat a mistake that has been done many times over the last few years, and it instead of going that route, it decides no, we're going to make this on point with what it means to be a dad and what it means to mm-hmm. deal with these types of situations where your family unit is broken against your will. And you've just got to roll with it. And I dug that because that is one of the underlying themes of this is, it's about making sure that you have the wherewithal to step up when things go bad. And even though in the traditional family reunion you rely on all the parties, with one of those parties is taken out of the equation, it does make things a lot harder. And it's a test of the one's mettle to see how far and they're able to go to hold everything together in this fragile state. And this is running all the way through the script, which is fantastic because once they leave the clinic and Danny and his daughter are going off in one direction and we don't know what's going to happen to them, but because these mothers aren't attacking every children, just their own children, there's a little bit of security in that. But now we have this other element, which is that the National Guard have been sent in, and they don't have the numbers to really isolate what's happening in this small town. And they're also been given orders to shoot on sight if they identify an infected person. And they don't fully know if the infection is specific to mothers only, or if it's with parents or even with childs, because as they get towards the city border, and the guardsmen are there, they want to examine Izzy. And her dad John is saying she's 12 years old. Like, she can't have kids. Like, she's not pregnant or anything like this. And the National Guardsmen just don't care. They give her the black light treatment, and they're about to go into the next steps when all of a sudden Tess just kind of shows up, kind of like Spider-Man, just leaping over a whole bunch of cars and landing, in the field, demanding her daughter return to her. And of course, John and Izzy are saying like, get away, don't do this. And a helicopter's overhead, and it's got a spotlight and a black light on there, and they see that Tess is infected, and they open fire, and John and Izzy kind of like turn their heads. They just couldn't bear to watch, mother and wife get gunned down. And when the firing stops and they look up, like they can't see Tess's body because they're on this like hilly ridge area. So
Right.
it's assumed that she's fallen off, and now they're being told by the National Guard, like, you can't leave this area. And this is where we're going to kind of cut off on the actual talks of the details of the script, because the next 20 pages kind of plays out with that question of like, if they're unable to leave and all the roads are blocked off and the National Guard is kind of holding a quarantine in this area, how are they going to get out and escape
Right.
this chaos?
Right.
Because it's not just the chaos of having to avoid Tess, who seems to be out of the picture. It's also the fact that National Guard are kind of an antagonist as well to all these other mothers that are hunting their children. So I want to
There's two things I want to bring up at this
Yeah.
point, though. One of it was mentioned in chat, which was a big thought that I had as well. We mentioned, and we talked about this before the show started too, that this actually showed up kind of low on the votes for the blacklist. And I was wondering, in your opinion, do you think possibly because it shows the strong men that there's a lot of influence that they don't like, that they want, and the way the movie starts off, there was all women boss, the mowing the lawn, this and that and the other, but here it's showing strong men doing the unthinkable. I wonder if that had an influence to lower it on the voting.
I don't know. I think it'd be foolish if they did.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a pro-parent story. Yeah, it does lean heavily on the father, because the gimmick is that it's the mothers are infected with the virus, and we're taking the maternal instincts and turning them in on their heads. That's the gimmick. But it's not, at no point are they actually kind of mocking or insulting mothers in this story. It's a tragedy take on it, and it's also another take on all the positive traits of masculinity and fatherhood. And
Right.
those things, I mean, objectively speaking, when it comes to criticism of masculinity, those things weren't really on the docket of things to criticize. But they were always just kind of pushed aside, because I guess there would be the counter argument to the other aspects of masculinity that certain parties would assume are toxic. So yeah, I think there might be some credence to that take, where some people were reading the script and thought, oh yeah, okay, cool, we're going to see some badass women stuff and what have you, and then it kind of there's a lot of badass mom stuff in this, like, because these moms this virus gives them super strength and super endurance and resilience to pain. They're doing some crazy stuff, but
right. That one freaky one at the beginning.
Yeah,
was
but it's
running
more
on the
like
broken stump.
it's more like an equalizer towards like the natural physicality of a man.
Yeah.
And it works for what this is, because it's almost like you kind of have your cake and eat it too. It's like you get to see some strong, powerful mothers who are infected with this virus trying to achieve their goal of getting their children and then, ending it. And then you've got the strong male character who has to protect his daughter, in this case, or his child, from not just the mother of his child, but also like a guy who you can tell in those first few pages that John and Tess, they actually do love each other. Like they're not staying married for the sake of the kid. Like there's actually still a romance with them, because we saw them jamming out in the basement, and it was kind of like their form of flirting. And even though John was there just kind of burn off some steam, it kind of turned into something else. And before it could go anywhere, of course, Tess realizes that she's coming down with something and showing a little bit of love to her husband is like, yeah, I'm not going to risk spreading this whatever it is I got to you because you're a doctor, and
Right.
you know that you not being at work to help your patients because you're sick kind of has an exponential negative impact. So
There was
it's pretty
two
clever
things.
stuff.
Yeah, there was two things though. I just remembered another one because I thought it was one of the more significant scenes. Was when they were on the bike and she's holding his wound before they go back to his clinic to get the minor surgery done. He expresses to his daughter how his and his mother's relationship was and explained a little bit why he was a little overbearing with her, but he understood because his mom was so terrible. That I thought was a good scene. But the other thing too was when you said they were checking the child out in a real healthcare crisis. If you're seeing the symptoms of all these mothers having the problem, they use the black light. They don't know if that mothers have it specifically because of being mothers and that it's latent or delayed in anybody else.
Right.
So they do have to wall it off. So even checking the kid or checking the men, it was still very important to keep them inside regardless.
Oh yeah, I agree. I mean, that's why I think they made such great late stage antagonists, is because again, they don't know. All they have is the one theory from Dr. Lynch, which is based on the limited observations they had at that time, and now the only new information they have is, well, we can identify this infection with the black light.
Right.
And what are our orders right now? Shoot on site once we confirm the infection. They're not even taking a chance. And I thought it's harsh, and it's also a little bit of abuse of power. But I mean, at this point here, it's also kind of a commentary on the fact that, well, pandemics can be quite devastating, and quarantine measures must be taken even into the extreme, especially considering the fact that the infected are committing some pretty heinous acts of violence against their own offspring. It's basically like no room for error, no chances, no mercy at this point, and it made them a pretty good antagonist, especially when they're kind of in a shouting match with John, who's trying to still protect his kid, and then these National Guard soldiers are basically saying, yeah, well, we don't know what's going on with this next, so you better do as we say because we have the power. And it goes back into another interesting topic. It's like, should a government, even in a crisis, usurp the responsibilities of a parent to their child, especially a parent that is doing everything they can to protect their child? And I like the fact that the dad, even though he wasn't able to figure out a way to get out of the town of sorts, he still maintained his responsibility and care of his daughter, even when challenged by the National Guard. So I thought that was a pretty good positive thing out there.
Right. It's too bad we have to stop at this point because there's a lot at the end, and you always tell people if they want to read the whole thing, you have your Patreon, and that would be a great place to catch the rest of it because there's a lot of other stuff that is really important. I think that unfortunately we don't get to talk about.
No, unfortunately we can't. All I can say is that if you want to find out, go read the script. You can do a Google search of it. If you're having trouble finding it on the regular interwebs, just reach out to me via Twitter X, and I can help you get that. Of course, as with all the scripts that we review here, please try not to make it go viral or try and share it indiscriminately out there, because we do want the odds for these writers to get these scripts put into production to be as favorable as possible. So before we go on to the next steps, Adega, let's not hold out any longer with regards to our decision on this script. Would you give this a green light or a pass?
Double green light. This should have been made. There were some corrections, like I said, with the locks on the doors and a few little things. But no, in my opinion, this one should have been made.
Yeah, I agree. I hope it does get made. I hope there's some smart producer out there that's trying to get the necessary funds to do this. I have to say, congratulations to Marc Bloom. You did write one heck of a strong, solid script with good themes. Definitely can be done on a low budget. A lot of fun, and and yeah, did some things that I've never seen before, in addition to seeing things that I have seen before, but in a slightly different way. So my tip of the hat to you, sir. This was an enjoyable read, easy read to do. Checking in over with the patrons on my Patreon here for the Scripts on Saturday show. Our patrons also agree with us. They also voted for this to greenlight as well with 100% of the vote. So yeah, we kind of broke a little bit of a our second part of this. We had a series of past scripts, 3 back to back. Last week's was a good script, so that broke the stretch. Now we're kind of starting a new stretch today with this script being a double green light as well. With that being said, we can check in with the chat because we have Roblox head Leslie Headland sent in a $2 super chat asking, how can someone get their scripts reviewed by you? Well, if you want, you can reach out to me on Twitter or on email at the scriptdoctorphd@gmail.com. And I can provide you with my consulting services where I can review and provide you notes and discussions on your script to help get it into the best form you need it in order to move it around. So that is always an option. And then we also have a super sticker of a poop emoji from the Dead Man for 99 cents. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for that. So yes, with that being said, Adega, please share with our wonderful audience where they can find you out there on the interwebs and what they can expect to see in the future.
Well, Darren just did a great job. He put my YouTube and then some links to some of my books. Unfortunately, at Barnes & Noble, it's split up into Adega or Adega Outlaw. So you have to look at both of those if you want to find it. I just recently released the third book in the my Blood Witch series. It is not as violent as the other ones. It is more of an exploratory fun for the wild heart set medieval type thing. So that one came out, and those of you who have them, if you start lining up the books, you'll notice that all the bindings will eventually form an image when I get the last 2 out. So that's it. I don't make too much of a presence on streaming very much anymore, but you can see what I'm editing currently on Sundays on my YouTube channel, and that's pretty much it for me. Like I said, you got my number, so if you need me, I'm here. But other than that, I'm just trying to finish up my work as quickly as I can.
Well, that's great. And yeah, I always love having you here because you have some great insights, especially from your own authorship, history as an author, and then history as in the medical field. And then this one was kind of right up our alley for hitting on all of those things. So I'm glad that is the case. So thank you so much, everyone out there listening on the live show or listening in replay. It's always greatly appreciated. For next week, we'll be back again with another script. Hopefully, we'll continue the stretch that we've started today. And with that being said, I want to wish you all a wonderful weekend. And I can't wait to see you all here next time. And never forget, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.